The circus lights went dark. But I couldn't leave. Every exit was locked. My phone had no signal. Then I heard music from center ring. Impossibly soft. A woman spun on silk ropes. Alone. Unaware of me. She caught my eye and didn't look away. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered. Neither was she. Not like this. Not so free. That night changed everything I thought I knew about myself. My name is Dakota Reyes, and I write for a small paper in Columbus, chasing stories no one else wants to cover. I never expected a circus assignment to unravel my carefully built life, or to make me question everything I believed about love and honesty. Silver Hollow Circus rolled into Millbrook, Ohio, on a Tuesday. Its faded red tints rising like a promise from another century. My editor wanted a feel-good feature, something about small-town wonder. But I sensed there was more beneath the sawdust and sequins. I met Josie Calloway backstage. Chalk dust on her hands, sweat still cooling on her collarbone from rehearsal under the big top. She barely looked up when I introduced myself, just asked if I was afraid of heights, like it was the only question that mattered. I told her no. Though my stomach dropped watching her climb the rigging without a harness, 40 feet above the dirt floor. That first interview lasted 4 hours instead of 30 minutes. Both of us forgetting the recorder was still running the whole time. She talked about her mother, a trapeze legend who died mid-performance, and how the family act had been hers to carry ever since. I asked why she stayed so late after every show, and she said the ropes only felt honest when no one else was watching. I came back the next night, telling myself it was for research, though I already knew that wasn't the whole truth. She was waiting under the lights again, like she'd expected me, and something in her smile made my chest feel too small. We started talking after every performance, sitting on overturned crates while the roustabout struck the smaller tents around us each night. Josie asked about my life in Columbus, and I found myself telling her things I'd never told anyone, not even my own mother. By the end of that first week, I realized I was staying in Millbrook far longer than any real assignment ever required. Josie taught me how to read the rigging, showing me knots and tension lines like she was teaching me a secret language. I learned the circus wasn't just canvas and lights but a family stitched together by exhaustion, loyalty, and years of unspoken histories. The wardrobe mistress watched us with sharp eyes, though she never said a word, just hummed old songs while sewing sequins. Frank Calloway, Josie's uncle and the ringmaster, ran the show with a showman's smile that never quite reached his tired eyes. I met Vera Lindqvist during a rehearsal, Josie's former flying partner, whose cool politeness felt sharper than any blade in the tent. "You're the reporter," Vera said, looking me over like she already knew exactly why I kept coming back every single night. Josie brushed off my questions about Vera, saying only that some partnerships end because the timing in the air goes wrong. I didn't push, though something in her voice told me the story was bigger than mistimed catches on a swinging bar. One night, after the crowds left, Josie taught me a simple hand balance, laughing when I toppled straight into the sawdust below. Her laugh was different than her stage smile, lower, real, like it belonged only to the people she trusted completely. I started noticing the way she watched me from the wire, like I was the only steady thing in a shifting world. We began sharing coffee at dawn before the town woke, sitting on the circus steps while fog rolled off the nearby fields. Josie told me about growing up moving from town to town, never staying long enough to have a real best friend. I told her about my own loneliness, the kind that comes from always being the observer instead of the one truly living. She reached over and took my hand, just once, quickly, like testing whether the ground beneath us would still hold. I didn't pull away, and something between us shifted permanently that night, quiet and unspoken, but undeniably, completely real. Aunt Dot found me alone by the trailers and said, "Careful with that one, honey. She loves like the wire has no net." I asked what she meant, but Dot only smiled sadly and went back to her sewing. humming a tune I didn't quite recognize. Josie started saving me a seat at the family dinners the crew shared after each show, folding chairs around a single long table. Frank noticed how often I lingered near the rigging, and his jaw tightened every time Josie laughed too easily in my direction. Vera watched us too, her expression unreadable, though I caught her eyes lingering on Josie's hand whenever it brushed mine. One quiet evening, Josie showed me photographs of her mother mid-flight, frozen forever in black and white above an adoring crowd. She never got to grow old, Josie said softly. So I promised myself I'd never waste a single day being afraid. I understood then that her recklessness in the air wasn't fearlessness at all, but grief transformed into something that could still fly. We started taking late walks past the edge of town, where the cornfield stretched gold under a sky full of stars. Josie asked if I believed in staying somewhere, or if I was always halfway out the door before I'd even fully arrived. I admitted I didn't know anymore. Not since meeting her had made every other plan I'd made feel suddenly small. She stopped walking, turned to face me, and asked quietly if she could kiss me right there under the open sky. I said yes before I'd even finished thinking, and the kiss felt like stepping off solid ground into open, endless air. Afterward, neither of us spoke. We just stood there holding hands, letting the quiet hold everything words couldn't yet say. We agreed to keep it between us for now. The circus world unkind to anything that strayed from its practiced image. I told myself it was only temporary, a secret we'd carry until the timing felt a little safer for both of us. Josie started leaving small notes tucked inside my notebook. Simple words like "meet me after the last bow tonight." Every single performance became a private language between us, her eyes finding mine in the crowd before every dangerous trick. I stopped taking notes for my article and started keeping a second notebook, one just for the things I felt. My editor called, asking when the story would be finished, and I realized I'd been stalling for reasons I hadn't admitted yet. I told him I needed more time, insisting the circus was far more complicated than a simple small-town feature piece. What I didn't tell him was that finishing the article meant leaving, and leaving meant losing whatever this had quietly become. Josie and I found an old storage tent behind the big top, quiet and forgotten, where we could talk without an audience. We spent hours there together, tracing constellations of old circus posters taped across the canvas walls above our heads. She told me she'd never let herself fall for anyone traveling with the show, afraid of the goodbye built into every contract. I promised her this felt entirely different, though even as I said it, I wasn't certain I could truly keep that promise. Aunt Dot began quietly covering for us, claiming she needed help with costume repairs whenever Frank asked where Josie had gone. One evening, Dot finally told me her own story, a woman she'd loved decades ago before choosing the safety of silence. I let them talk me out of it, Dot said, and I've regretted it every single day since I turned 30. Her words settled into me like both a warning and a challenge, something impossible to simply shake off afterward that night. I started imagining a real future that included Josie, something I hadn't let myself imagine with anyone in years. She started imagining it too, though neither of us said the word future out loud yet. Not there. Not then. We watched the sunrise together after one long night rehearsal, her head resting on my shoulder as the fields turned gold. I haven't felt this steady in years, Josie admitted. Not since before Mom died and everything felt like falling. I held her closer and told her I wasn't going anywhere. Not until she asked me to, and maybe not even then. For those weeks, everything felt suspended in a fragile, golden bubble, untouched by the world waiting just outside the tent flaps. The bubble broke one morning when Frank called an emergency meeting, his face gray, clutching a stack of unpaid supplier invoices. Silver Hollow Circus was drowning in debt, and Frank admitted he might have to sell the family's traveling rights entirely. Josie went pale, understanding immediately that selling meant losing her mother's rig, the one relic she had left of her. That night she didn't come to our storage tent, and I found her instead sitting alone beneath the darkened big top. "If we lose this place," she said quietly, I lose the last real piece of my mother that still feels alive. I wanted to help. So I offered to write about the circus's financial struggle, hoping public sympathy might save the show. Josie hesitated, wary of outsiders knowing too much. But eventually she agreed, trusting me more than she trusted almost anyone else. What I hadn't told her yet was that my editor had assigned me a very different kind of story weeks before. He wanted an exposé. Rumors of embezzlement swirling around small traveling circuses, and Silver Hollow was one of his targets. I had buried that assignment under notes about trapeze rigging and sunrise walks, telling myself I would deal with it later. Vera cornered me backstage, arms crossed, and asked exactly what my article was really going to say about the Callaways. I told her the truth, that I hadn't decided yet, and she laughed without any warmth in the sound at all. You reporters always decide eventually, Vera said. And it's never the family who ends up looking good in the end. Her warning rattled me far more than I wanted to admit, especially knowing how much I now had to lose myself. I finally told Josie about the embezzlement assignment, watching her expression shift from confusion into something colder and more guarded. You've been here investigating my family this whole time? She asked, her voice flat, stepping back like I'd struck her. I tried explaining that my feelings for her had nothing to do with the assignment, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Feelings don't erase what you were sent here to do, she said, and I was foolish enough to forget that fact. She walked away before I could even answer, leaving me standing alone under lights that suddenly felt cold and unforgiving. For 3 days, Josie avoided me entirely, speaking only when the show demanded it. Her smile purely professional and distant. Aunt Dot found me crying behind the trailers and gently reminded me that broken trust takes real effort to rebuild. I called my editor and told him flatly I wouldn't write the embezzlement piece, not without understanding the full story first. He threatened to pull me off the assignment entirely, reminding me the paper needed something publishable within the next 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Frank quietly met with a buyer from a larger circus chain, one interested only in the rigging and the name. Josie discovered the meeting by accident, finding paperwork on Frank's desk detailing terms for selling her mother's entire trapeze act. She confronted him in front of the whole crew, demanding to know how he could sell away her mother's memory so easily. Frank admitted quietly that the show was drowning, insisting selling was the only way to keep everyone else's jobs secure. Josie stormed off, and this time I followed her, unwilling to let her carry this alone. Whatever she thought of me, I found her sitting at the edge of the cornfield, staring at nothing, tears finally breaking through her guarded composure. I sat beside her without speaking, letting her decide whether she wanted comfort or simply wanted to be left alone. Eventually she leaned into me, whispering that she was so tired of losing everything that ever mattered to her heart. I told her I understood now why she pulled away, and that I was still sorry for not telling her sooner. I need to know you're not going to disappear the moment this story stops being interesting, she said, voice shaking. I promised her I wasn't going anywhere, that whatever happened with the circus, I wanted to stay for her, not the story. She didn't fully trust me yet, but she let me hold her hand again, a small fragile bridge rebuilding between us. Word spread through Millbrook that the circus was struggling, and townsfolk began whispering about Frank's questionable business dealings for years. Some accused him of skimming ticket money, while others claimed he'd mismanaged funds meant for animal care and fair wages. I started digging quietly on my own, torn between protecting Josie's family and uncovering whatever truth existed beneath the rumors. Vera, surprisingly, offered to help, admitting she still cared about the circus even after everything that happened between her and Josie. Together we found old ledgers showing Frank hadn't stolen anything, but had instead covered performer medical bills out of his own pocket. The debt wasn't corruption, it was quiet sacrifice. Frank protecting his family the only way he'd known how to do it. I brought the ledgers to Josie, watching years of resentment toward her uncle soften into something closer to painful understanding. He never told me, she whispered. staring at the numbers proving his sacrifice instead of the betrayal she'd always assumed. Josie went to Frank that night. And for the first time I saw them embrace like family instead of rivals. I finally wrote my article, choosing to tell the true story instead of the sensational one my editor originally wanted. I titled it The Last Family Circus, focusing on sacrifice, legacy, and the quiet dignity of people keeping a dying art alive. My editor wasn't thrilled, but agreed to run it, admitting the human story was stronger than the scandal he'd hoped for. Just when things felt like they were healing, Vera pulled me aside with a warning I wasn't prepared to hear at all. "Be careful," she said. "Josie loves fully, but she's also terrified of being left the way her mother left her." I asked what she meant, and Vera admitted, quietly, that fear of loss was the real reason she and Josie ended things. "I got a job offer in another state," Vera said, "and she couldn't handle watching someone else she loved just walk away." Her words lodged themselves in my chest, a quiet dread building beneath the fragile happiness Josie and I had only just rebuilt. My article ran in the regional paper, and to everyone's shock, it went viral. Shared thousands of times within just days. Donations poured in from strangers moved by the story, enough to cover Silver Hollow's debt and save it from being sold. Frank thanked me through tears, saying I'd given his late sister's legacy a second chance he never thought possible. But saving the circus meant it would keep touring. And Millbrook was never meant to be more than a 2-week stop. My own editor called with unexpected news. A magazine in Chicago wanted to hire me full-time, starting in only 3 weeks. It was everything I worked toward for years. A real career. Stability. The kind of future I used to dream about alone. But taking it meant leaving Millbrook, leaving the circus, and leaving Josie just as we'd finally found solid ground together. I hadn't told Josie about the offer yet, unsure how to say words that might shatter everything we'd rebuilt so carefully. Meanwhile, my mother called. Having seen my article and recognizing far more between the lines than I'd intended to reveal. "Is this trapeze girl more than just a source?" she asked, her tone careful, the question landing like a held breath. I told her the truth for the first time, that I had fallen in love with a woman named Josie Calloway. The silence on the line stretched painfully long before my mother finally admitted she needed time to understand it fully. It wasn't outright rejection, but it wasn't acceptance either. And the uncertainty sat heavy in my chest for days afterward. I told Josie about my mother's reaction, and she squeezed my hand, saying she understood that kind of complicated, quiet fear. "My family accepted me," she said, "but this town never really has. Not fully. Not without whispers behind closed doors." As if proving her point, someone spray-painted a slur across the ticket booth the very next morning before sunrise broke. Frank had it painted over within the hour. But the damage to Josie's sense of safety couldn't be erased so easily. She grew quieter after that, pulling slightly inward. And I worried the fragile trust between us might crack all over again. That same week, during a rehearsal, Josie's rigging line snapped unexpectedly, sending her falling nearly 20 feet before the net caught her. My heart stopped watching her fall, and I sprinted across the ring faster than I'd ever moved in my entire life. She was shaken but physically unhurt, and the crew immediately began inspecting every inch of rigging for signs of tampering. They found a frayed cable, worn thin. Though whether from age or something more sinister, no one could say for certain. Vera blamed herself instantly, admitting she'd meant to replace that exact cable weeks earlier but had simply forgotten in the chaos. Josie forgave her quickly, but the accident shook something loose in both of us, a reminder of how fragile everything really was. That night, holding Josie while she trembled, I finally told her about the Chicago job offer waiting for my answer. Her face went still and careful, like she was bracing herself for another goodbye she hadn't asked for or expected. "You should take it," she said quietly, though her eyes told a very different story than her steady, generous words. I told her I didn't know what I wanted anymore. torn between the career I'd built and the life I'd found here. "Don't you choose me out of fear of choosing yourself," Josie said. I refused to be someone's excuse for staying small. Her words stung because they were entirely true, forcing me to finally examine what I wanted instead of what felt safest. I spent a sleepless night walking the fairgrounds alone, replaying every moment since I'd first gotten locked inside that circus tent. I thought about my mother's uncertain silence, about Chicago's bright promise, and about Josie's laugh under the string lights at midnight. By dawn, I still didn't have an answer, but I knew running from the decision wouldn't make it disappear entirely. The circus was scheduled to leave Millbrook in exactly 5 days, moving on toward its next town 3 states away. Josie asked if I would come with them for a while, just to see if this life could ever truly fit me. Chicago called again, needing my answer within the week, the magazine unwilling to hold the position open much longer than that. I felt pulled in 2 entirely different directions, each one representing a different version of the person I might slowly become. Aunt Dot found me staring blankly at the rigging one evening and asked what exactly I was so afraid of losing. "The version of me who finally chose something real and difficult," I admitted, "instead of always just watching from the sidelines." Dot smiled gently and said sometimes the safest choice and the right choice turn out to be 2 very different things. That night, Josie and I finally talked openly. No more half-truths. No more careful avoidance of the actual, difficult question. "I love you," she said plainly. "And I need you to know that before you make any decision about anything at all." I told her I loved her too, that the words had been sitting in my chest for weeks, waiting for courage. But loving her didn't erase the practical fear of choosing an unstable, traveling life over everything I'd worked so hard for. Josie understood, saying she'd rather I chose honestly than stayed out of guilt, and slowly grew to resent her for it. We agreed I'd take 1 more day, just one, to make the decision that would shape both of our futures completely. That night, Vera came to find me, admitting she regretted letting her own fear push Josie away all those years ago. "Don't make my mistake," she said. "Loving someone and then leaving them because staying felt too uncertain to fully trust." Her honesty surprised me, and I realized even old rivals could become unexpected teachers when it came to matters of the heart. I called the Chicago magazine and asked if there was any way to negotiate a remote position instead of relocating immediately. They hesitated at first, but eventually agreed to a trial period, letting me write remotely for 3 months before anything permanent. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a real chance to choose both my career and the woman I loved. I found Josie at sunrise, told her about the compromise, and watched hope replace fear across her tired, beautiful face. "You're staying?" she asked, breath caught, like she couldn't quite trust the good news landing so gently in front of her. "I'm staying," I said, "not because I'm afraid to leave, but because I finally know exactly what I want to keep." She kissed me right there in the open field, no longer caring who from the circus might happen to walk past us. Word of our relationship spread quickly through the crew, though most had already suspected it for weeks without ever saying so aloud. Frank pulled me aside, admitting he'd known since the night he caught us laughing together behind the wardrobe trailer months earlier. "Josie deserves someone who chooses her on purpose," he said, "and it seems like you finally have. So welcome to the family." Vera hugged me too, genuinely, saying she was glad Josie had found someone willing to stay through the hard, uncertain parts. The final performance in Millbrook arrived, the whole town packing the tent, drawn partly by my viral article about the circus. Josie's act that night was billed differently, no longer just the sparrow, but dedicated openly to her mother's original, beloved routine. Before climbing the rigging, she found me in the front row and mouthed 3 words that made my whole chest ache. Then she flew. And it was the most fearless performance I'd ever witnessed. Grief and joy fused into something truly transcendent. Midway through, disaster struck. A support beam groaned, shifting under the tense weight from an approaching, unexpected summer storm outside. The crowd gasped as dust rained down, And Josie, suspended midair, had only seconds to adjust her entire routine safely. I watched, frozen, as she caught the second bar with perfect precision, using the shifting beam as an unplanned, dramatic flourish. The audience roared, unaware how close real disaster had actually come, believing the near miss was simply part of the daring show. Backstage, Frank ordered immediate repairs, admitting the old tent poles needed replacing before the circus could safely travel any further. Josie, adrenaline still coursing through her veins, pulled me into a fierce hug, laughing and crying at the very same time. "I've never felt more alive," she said. "And I think I finally understand why my mother loved this life so completely." That night, my mother called again, saying she'd read the article a second time and wanted to meet Josie in person. It wasn't full acceptance yet, but it was an open door. And I understood that some doors just need time to widen. Aunt Dot approached us both, tears in her eyes, saying watching us reminded her of the choice she never let herself make. "Don't waste this," she said. "I spent 30 years wondering, and wondering turned out to be its own quiet, permanent tragedy." Josie promised us she never would, holding my hand tightly, like anchoring a promise into something solid and undeniably real. Frank announced Silver Hollow Circus would rebuild fully, funded partly by donations and partly by a new, honest business partner. He asked Josie to take over as co-owner someday, passing down responsibility the same way her mother once passed down courage. Josie agreed, on one condition, that the circus would openly welcome performers regardless of who they loved, without exception or apology. Frank agreed without any hesitation, admitting it was long past time the family business reflected the family's actual, lived values. The town of Millbrook, once uncertain, showed up in record numbers for the circus's rebuilt, celebratory reopening performance weeks later. I stood in the crowd, notebook forgotten, simply watching the woman I loved fly freely above people who finally, truly accepted her. Vera found new purpose training younger performers, admitting she'd finally let go of old jealousy in favor of genuine friendship. My magazine job continued remotely, and I began writing a longer piece about circus families and the histories they quietly carry. Josie and I moved into a small house near the winter fairgrounds, close enough that she could still train every single day. My mother visited that spring, awkward but earnest, watching Josie practice with something that slowly softened into genuine, quiet admiration. "She's remarkable," my mother admitted afterward. "And I understand now why you were willing to change your whole life for her." I told her I hadn't changed my life for Josie. I'd simply finally chosen the life that felt honestly, completely mine. Standing beneath the big top one final evening, Josie asked if I regretted ever getting locked inside that tent months earlier. I told her it was the only lock that had ever set me free instead of trapping me somewhere I didn't belong. She smiled, took my hand, and led me toward the ropes, teaching me once more how to hold on without fear. Years later, I still watch her fly every single night, no longer as a reporter chasing a story, but as her home. We built a life stitched from sawdust and courage, proof that love, like the wire, only holds you if you truly commit. Fendi.